I'll just say by way of super quick introduction to Ben. I mean, when you're talking about human scale, regenerative, biodynamic, small farms, the kind of farms where you can go and just down the street, basically talk to your farmer who's growing your food. There's maybe a dozen, maybe half a dozen of true rock stars out there that have built a body of work that has become something people build their entire operations around. I think it's safe to say that in North America and even beyond, every single day, growers are asking themselves, what would the lean farm do? There's these three books that are out now where Ben has sketched out how to import these Japanese efficiency projects or philosophies into growing, make farms more efficient, more trim, more lean. We don't necessarily need to recount all of that stuff, but we want to delve into the lean micro farm here, the second line of which offers the promise how to get small, embrace local, live better, and work less. And that is music to my ears. And I think it's probably a vision that is really going to appeal to a lot of people as well. So I've just set you up, Ben. I know you're too humble to say those things about yourself, but you are, in essence, a brush with a rock star of local agriculture. And your bio is in the chat for people who want to review some of the things that you have achieved. Welcome, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here. I know our time is going to go really quick, so I'm going to jump right into the presentation here. And I'll tell you right away, I'm not great at reading chats as I present. So if you want to just interrupt and tell me what questions are showing up, and I'm happy to have an informal back and forth here. What I thought I would begin with is a bit of inspiration. Why did we choose to go from 5 acres to 1/3 of an acre? Then I want to move into some nuts and bolts, showing you in detail how we built our micro farm. And if time permits, I'll show you my top 7 tomato growing tips too.
Ooh, all right.
In addition, have plenty of time, I hope, for your questions. First of all, the food system that we have inherited is what one might call bigger is better food system. You're familiar with Earl S. Butts. I grew up just a few hours from his farm in Indiana here, and he said, get big or get out. Another phrase that I prefer is get small and stay in, but we'll get to that in a minute. But what we've inherited is a system that is on this track. By the end of the century, there'll be half as many farms around the world, and farms will be twice as big as they are today. So just take a second, let that soak in. This is not just in the US, this is a global statistic. Half as many farms globally, and farms will be twice as big in just a few decades. From 2010 to 2022, the most recent statistics that we have show that we are now on track to we're losing about 1,000 farms per month in the US. Most of these are small farms, mid-sized farms. It's a very, very, very rapid consolidation that's happening sort of beneath our noses within agriculture. And it's sort of a slow drip, drip, drip. There's not like one event. And so it doesn't pop up in the news very often. It's not sexy stuff to report on, but it's happening. That trend continues. You can see the trend line on your screen. The U.S. small farm movement continues to shrink. 5% of U.S. farm income in 2022 was from small farms. We're down to now fewer than 1% of the population engaged in agriculture for part of their living. So you're joining a tiny movement, but I'll tell you, you're joining a very energetic, enthusiastic movement of very smart people who are working to buck the trend. There are all kinds of ramifications for a bigger is better food system. I don't have time to get into nearly all of them, but we do know that 11% of greenhouse gas emissions can be traced back to agriculture. Much of this has to do with transportation, which is a segue to what I'll call a small is beautiful food system. The theoretical framework for my book, The Lean Micro Farm, is E.F. Schumacher's tome written 50 years ago called Small is Beautiful. in which he laid out the case that all of our modern problems and the quote unquote modern problems that he wrote about 50 years ago have only exacerbated now. Species extinction, pollution, uh, inhumane working conditions. All of these problems are a cause, makes a persuasive case to me, of large scale thinking. Gigantism would be the word that he uses. So when we apply that thinking to the food system, the average head of lettuce travels more than 1,500 miles from the field in which it's grown to the point at which it reaches the plate of the consumer. 1,500 miles. It's a very long distance. Compare that to micro farms, which in our case, we've proven you can make a living with a micro farm with the right mindset, selling food within 1.5 miles from the farm. This has a huge impact for emissions that cause climate change. I was fortunate to be able to visit small farms in Wales a few years ago doing some trainings. And Wales is a small part of the United Kingdom where there are many, many small farms. In Ireland, of course, would be an example too. Many micro scale farms feeding their communities. Did some work a couple of years ago with USAID on Nigeria project, which really reinforced to me the beauty. One of the most beautiful things about small farms is at low cost to start up. And so the best way to increase equity in agriculture, to make sure that anyone can grow, is to put priority on small farms. I grew up on a 500-acre corn and soybean farm. I can't afford to grow on that scale, actually. But it really doesn't cost much to start a 1/3 acre garden. Glory, who we worked with, she has a catfish farm, uses her house. And many catfish growers in Nigeria use the alleyways behind their houses. They tuck their farms in wherever they can, and really have shrewd, low-cost, lean thinking in their businesses. A few weeks ago, I was able to visit Chile, and these are farms in the Patagonia. Patagonia, the clothing company, sponsored this training trip, and I was impressed with just how much potential small farms have to increase food security. The Patagonia is a region that was virtually inaccessible until the Pinochet government built a dirt road down through the Patagonia and opened that area up. But that was only in the 1980s. And so this area has not had access to outside food. But as soon as that road opened up, outside food started flooding in. And there are small farmers who want to buck that trend and grow food for the Patagonia, for Patagonians. And it's really incredible. This is a farmer on the left here. He modeled his farm after our farm, an Indiana clay bottom farm. And you could take that picture, you could do a cut and paste, and it looks like it could belong in Indiana, but so productive in feeding people just within a few miles of the farm. Another benefit is that micro scale farms promote self-reliance. Okay, a term that I dove deep into this concept in the book was Swadeshi's term, or I'm sorry, Gandhi's term, Swadeshi, which he defined as the use and service of our immediate surroundings to the exclusion of the more remote. When Gandhi spoke to groups, he often liked to weave. And this is a charkha spinning wheel that he invented. He was a serial inventor, invented tools for farming, tools for catching chickens, snake catching tools, clothes, of course. But this charkha has two wheels on it. Most charkhas at the time just had one. So he's spinning twice as quickly with his invention here as the traditional method. The point being that the small villages can be self-reliant. In small villages, small farmers, micro-scale farmers can be just as efficient, in fact, more productive in many cases than their larger scale counterparts. Another example of another benefit that I love of microscale farming, we've certainly seen this on our farm, is that you can really zero in on waste and become very close to a no waste farm. It's said that 1/3 of the food produce grown in California is never even picked. It's grown, it's fertilized, it's cultivated, but it is never even picked because there's vast misalignment between what's produced and what the marketplace needs. And that's simply a consequence of the gigantism of our food system. Now, on this farm that I visited in the Patagonia, they actually determine the rent that each of their crops that they collect from each of the crops pays on their farm. So they measure it on a square foot basis, the yield of their crops. And then they divided that by how many weeks the crop was in the ground. Does that make sense? And
Mhm.
so they know which crops their local community is paying them to grow, and they're going to focus on the most productive and profitable crops. And what that means is too that they're being very choosy and only growing crops that sell for high margins and selling virtually everything that they produce because of that precision. Wouldn't it be nice to grow with big mountains in the background? Uh, so the question here is, and there are other benefits too. We don't have time to get into all of them, but there's increased biodiversity the more micro and small scale farms that you have. These are healthy places for kids. If you're a 2-year-old kid, this is my wife Rachel with our son Leander. Would you rather be on a 2,000-acre monocrop farm or on a diverse, beautiful farm where more than 100 types of cultivars are growing? There are frogs and toads and snakes and grasshoppers, all kinds of interesting things for kids to do on farms. So the question I have is that what if, like, let's entertain that question. Let's take it seriously. What if small farms were at the center of our food system instead of at the margins?
Boy, are you in the right crowd to ask that question, Ben.
This is a good segue. If anyone has some questions or comments, are there some other micro farm benefits that I'm not touching on here? It just seems so obvious to me that there's so many benefits to centering small farms. It just doesn't make sense why we're not doing it.
Okay, Ben, did you want to the 7 tips on tomatoes? You're going to hold that to the end, or did you have more of this sort of vision presentation that you wanted to do?
No, this is as much visioning as I'm going to do tonight.
I'm so I'm so glad that you started with this. I didn't know where, because you're a very practical guy. These books are incredibly, almost deceptively practical, humble. They're written, with hints and tips and things. And I was going to try to get out of you the sort of sweeping vision. There is an activist in that soul of yours, and you see things globally. You see things systematically. That's very obvious from things you've said already.
Let me just give you one of my favorite E.F. Schumacher quotes is he says, first must come the work, intellectual effort. Then the word must become flesh. So
Mhm.
he was very interested in practical solutions and of course founded the institutes on a human scale technology with a human face, and was very interested in small tools that actually work on farms and make us more productive. And it's one of my passions too. I work for a Japanese tool company actually on designing tools, that paper pot tool being one of them, that are changing productivity on farms. And I'm very passionate about that too. Let me talk a little bit about ourselves for a minute. By way of introduction, Claiborne Farms are named. We're a 4-season micro farm in Indiana in our 17th year of operation. Almost all of our food is sold within a mile and a half of our farm. That's by design. Also by design is that all of our fertility comes from within a mile and a half of the farm. So we don't truck in minerals that are mined from far away. We've been very conscientious to make sure that our work hours stay reasonable. We're tiny, just 15,000 square feet in production, one third of an acre, and was sales that of about 80,000 per year, and we can net around half. So we're not making doctors' wages here, but we're making maybe school teacher wages. And I farm about 80% of the time and then do educational work, writing books and doing workshops and stuff and such for the rest of the time. Now, people often ask, well, how can you do 80,000 on just 15,000 square feet? Well, think about that on a square foot basis. That comes to roughly $3 a square foot. And one head of lettuce takes about a square foot. You can easily grow 2 crops of head lettuce in a season in Indiana here. And so if we sell those heads for $1.50 a piece, and actually at a good market here, you can sell them for twice that amount, then that get you that gross sales number just with head lettuce, the simplest crop there is to produce. Now, imagine you start growing things like tomatoes and arugula and sugar snap peas and some higher dollar value items. I think actually 80 is a low estimate. I think a really focused micro farm on 15,000 square feet could easily sell six figures in a year.
Ben, may I please integrate a couple of questions that are popping up in the chat that are relevant to what you're talking about? We have one question regarding CSAs. Is that 80K direct sales only? Do you run a CSA? And also the other question is, where specifically do you sell?
We sell in Goshen, Indiana, which is a small college town. It's a Mennonite community. There's a Mennonite college here, and my wife and I are from the Mennonite community too. We sell 80% of our food to a couple of restaurants. I'm really the back-end farm for a couple of restaurants. Close ties with a couple of chefs, and they tell me what to grow, when to grow it, and how much. We do have a small CSA, just 20 CSA members, and a short 14-week season that we keep as a sort of insurance in case which was handy. When the pandemic hit and the restaurants closed, we quickly scaled up that CSA, but that's to keep our muscles flexed if we need to pivot our business.
I've heard you describe this CSA elsewhere, and I think the way you approach it, especially vis-a-vis packaging, is a detail that I would love you to share with folks.
Well, we of course had an interest in a no waste CSA. And so what we do is harvest all of our food, put it into totes, put the totes into our delivery vehicle, and then drive around to our customer's porch. And we've asked people to put coolers on their porches. And then we simply drop food from the totes directly into their coolers. So there's zero plastic. There's not even a container or a box for the CSA. And we like it because it's simply easier on our end. Our customer, no one wants to waste things. Our customers like not having to deal with plastic and twist ties and all that too. So it's sort of a win-win.
Yeah, and you don't have to buy all that stuff and store it. That's a sort of sunk cost, isn't it?
That's true. That's true. It's big cost savings.
We've got a question. What made you choose restaurants as your main customers and, not groceries or specialty stores or what have you?
Well, one of our major accounts is a co-op, a small grocery store, and another is a brewery. And it's simply a matter of who is in town and who would buy our food. And if you can hold that question for a minute, I'm going to show you how we chose those first customers, and that might help answer it. So we have 2 part-time staff on our farm, and we've been using the lean method, which my books go deeper into. I'm not going to get into that as much tonight, but been using fairly strict lean philosophy and method here for 9 years on our farm. My wife, Rachel, with me here in a tomato greenhouse. And there's another overview of the farm. Okay, so some nuts and bolts stuff here. I know Kurt said there are a number of you starting farms interested in selling food that you grow in your home garden. So hopefully this will help. So to answer that question about how we secured our first customers, we simply did a Google search for anyone who's buying food within 1.5 miles of the farm, okay? Which is to say from our farm to downtown Goshen. So this included schools, restaurants, nursing homes, and it really surprised us. This is just a partial list within Goshen, small community of 40,000. And there were easily 40 plus establishments that we could have sold our food to, places that are buying food on a regular basis. And so what my best tip is to start with that search and leave your assumptions at the door. One of our best accounts actually has turned out to be a donut shop. Of all things, Dutch made a bakery in Goshen, and we convinced them to include our lettuce and tomatoes on their lunch menu. They sell sandwiches, and we've had that account for more than 10 growing seasons. So check your assumptions at the door, do some door knocking, and present, do an afternoon of research. Go around and talk to these establishments, tell them what you can produce, and I think you'll be surprised just how much business there is right close to home. In Falmouth especially, it seems, I've only spent a week there, but it seems to me like there would be a lot of local customers right in town. So a key concept here, this is from Lean, is Genchi Genbutsu, which means up close personal observation to thoroughly understand a situation. That means you physically go to the source. And the Japanese and Toyota, they'd say the key for Toyota, why they jetted around Ford and GM, is that they sent their engineers to the US and they drove in vehicles, they talked to customers, and they really performed Genchi Genbutsu with a high level of precision to figure out what we wanted in our vehicles over here. So you start with a customer, work backwards from them. So this is me talking with a chef Jesse at a brewing company here. And what we do is take around what we call these value sheets. And they're simply very simple spreadsheets that ask the chef, what do you want? When do you want it? And how much? So if Jesse says, hey, Ben, I'd like tomatoes this season, I don't let him off the hook that easily. I want to be precise. I'm going to ask him, well, what color tomatoes do you want? What size do you want? What level of ripeness do you want? When do you want them delivered? Jesse sleeps about 1 o'clock in the afternoons. He actually doesn't want me showing up in the mornings with his tomatoes. It's important that they show up a couple hours before their 5 o'clock rush. That's a high value to them. Then how much do you want on a weekly basis? And so after an afternoon of these conversations, we'll have a stack of 6 or 8 value sheets, which are a very powerful farm plan. And especially if we can be a bit choosy, we're not going to grow everything on these value sheets, but we have essentially a template for designing our farm, which is what we do. We take those value sheets and then we crack open the seed catalog and order our seeds and design and lay out our farm. So we produce what customers want, when they want those items, and in the right amounts. I mentioned this idea of being choosy, and this is really important for micro scale farming because margins are slim. You simply cannot afford to grow every crop in the catalog, in the Johnny's catalog. You cannot afford to sell to every customer, even in Falmouth. There are simply some customers who are capable of paying you fair prices and others who simply won't be able to. And so what we do is this, we say, who are the most consistent high volume order customers who can pay those higher prices and who's closest to the farm. And we're going to choose, of the 60 or so customers in Goshen, we chose fewer than 10 who we called vital customers. The same with our products. We're going to choose products that have a relatively low cost of production for us, that we can sell for those high prices, high margin prices, and that we can produce in a high volume on a small footprint. So we're not growing sweet corn. We're not growing butternut squash and watermelon. I'm not obviously opposed to those crops, but that's for other growers to do. There are a lot of Amish growers and larger scale producers who can do that. But we're going to focus on crops that we can sell $5 a square foot over the course of a season. So that's $2.50 per crop. If we're going to crop those items 2 times, so $5 a square foot is the goal that we have. And there's still waste. We have weather-related problems. We have deer coming and eating crops, and we aren't quite to that $5 spot, but we're very close. And then this is the magic. What you do is you overlap your vital products and your vital customers, and you have what Vilfredo Pareto, he talked about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, he called your vital core. And you've heard of that 80-20 principle, I assume, where 20% of your efforts probably produce 80% of your income. That's certainly been true in our experience, and it's really a discipline to find what is that vital core and focus on it. But it's been key to our higher margins. So I go to Louisiana for trainings every year, and a friend of mine down there, Leroy Conish, puts it like this. Came from the real estate business. And he says, Ben, all you're saying is lean farming means finding the highest and best use to your land. He said, it's the same thing I said when I sold houses. What's the highest our property? What's the highest and best use of this property? But it takes discipline, but it's worth it to apply that focus, to not try to please everyone. I've been a bit ruthless here, and I want to just emphasize that lean doesn't have to be mean, doesn't have to strip you of your values. It can actually, leaning up in our experience means that you have more time and energy to devote to your passions and what you do value. In our case, that's spending time with our young kids, and we love to grow a wide range of crops. We have a very diverse farm, but a very focused market garden, if that makes sense. So we have pecan trees, chestnuts, fruit orchard. The kids, you can see, have a sunflower garden, all kinds of unlean projects that we have time and energy to do because we've focused our market gardening. I wanted to share a couple of getting started tips with field management. And if you're looking to start a new micro farm, this is really the first step. The first thing to do is to find yourself 4 inches of compost material. It's called the deep mulch method, and spread that on the surface. And then every couple of years, feed the microbial life in the soil, in that compost, by giving it a half an inch to an inch of fresh compost. Very, very minor task to keep that fed. What you're doing is essentially setting yourself up at the beginning for many years of high production and growth. I'll show you what we did on our farm. We moved our farm 5 years ago to a new location, and we did 1 round of initial tilling. This is the only tilling we've done on this farm to work in the pasture grasses that were here. You can still see the cows in the background if you look closely enough. You can see those piles of compost, however, in waiting. And we spread that compost. We brought in some trucks and got 4 inches of compost directly on the soil surface. Had some college students, some interns come out and help us spread this compost. And we didn't create raised beds. It looks sort of like it here, but those are just paths, trodden paths. And this is not perfect compost. You look closely, you'll see chunks and sticks and that sort of thing. That's how I like it, actually. 80% broken down compost means that it's fresh. It's at its peak for mineral content. A pile that's been sitting around for 10 years has had all the goodies leached out of it. So here you can see we're putting it right on the surface, even in our greenhouse. We're going to spread compost on the surface. To be honest, we were building a house at the time, and it took us a couple years to do it. We didn't do it all in one go here, but in retrospect, we probably should have. And then this is key: don't till. Don't get out of Broad Fork. Don't mix it in. Just grow food. Grow directly into the compost. What you're doing is giving yourself 20% plus organic matter. You're suppressing the weeds, and every time it rains, a slow drip of minerals filters its way down to the root zone. You're building a house for microbes. This is a biological system, a living system, and you have high biological activity, which means that the fungal networks are very alive, funneling nutrients to your crops. The bacteria are converting the bits of leaves and twigs into food. They're going to channel through those fungal networks. And there are literally hundreds of thousands, millions of other microbes at work in there. We've only given a name to 10%, fewer than 10% of living organisms in soil actually has a name. There's way more we don't know than what we do know. But what we do know is that organic matter and thick layers of it builds a beautiful mansion, beautiful home for this high biological activity. And I can attest, I can tell you through my experience, you don't need to truck in fertilizer. You don't need to pay for fish emulsion. If you have good compost, high biological activity, that is all you need. The way we laid out our farm was to use meters. Our beds are about 1 meter in width, 42 inches, and 12 inches is the path. I think the bed width is up to you, but the wider the better for productivity's sake. 42 inches, we can, with a light skip, we can hop across them. And that works well with our production system. We use paper pots, like I'd mentioned, for most of our crops. And so we designed the length to accommodate 2 of our paper pot chains. Here's Ben Matthews shared these pictures that I used in the book, showing the exact same process, but on an even it's a micro farm at a backyard scale here, but just to show you how accessible this is. You can lay down cardboard if you really want to smother the weeds, but not really necessary if you get a good till. Spread 4 inches compost on the surface and simply start growing. Don't complicate matters. I'm not an advocate of this double digging method. I'm not an advocate of, burying wood chips or fish. You can do all kinds of things, but in my experience, simply collecting leaves from your neighborhood, let them break down for a season. To me, that's compost. And that's all actually that we use. Here's a truck of leaves being delivered. Just this afternoon, I was out with a skid loader turning the leaves. We'll turn them 2 or 3 times, a very simple process, and start using them. I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to compost making, because if something was once living, it'll decompose. And if it's not finished here, by the time you spread it and grow into it a season, it'll be decomposed sooner than you can imagine. So here's an image of, we're going to do just that skim coating of 1/2 inch to 1 inch every couple of years. Just leave that stuff right on the surface, and that gives food for your little animals in this soil. My favorite time to do that, I don't know if the ground freezes or not where you are, but when the ground's frozen, you can drive heavy equipment over, and even on a home scale, you can use your garden cart with ruthless abandon in the winter when the ground's frozen, and not worry about soil compaction. And I can't emphasize this enough, that the real benefit here is that with one big push, you give yourself nutrients for many, many, many seasons. It's said that compost releases minerals up to 9 years after its initial application. So you do yourself a service for many years ahead by putting on thick layers of compost at the beginning. Part and parcel to this system here, my best tip for field management is to apply what I call 2-step bed flipping. So when a crop is finished, don't till it in, don't pull it up. Leave the roots in the ground. In fact, leave the whole dang plant in the ground, just smother it. So even tall green beans here, we're just going to smother. Spinach. We like to use these silage tarps. They're readily available in Indiana. You can use landscape fabric too, anything that's going to block sun, deprive the crop of sun. And if you can find an impervious material, then you deprive it of oxygen too. And it's a bit like bokashi fermenting, composting, which is a Japanese composting method that involves oxygen deprivation. In the same way you make kimchi in your kitchen, and especially if you're covering a brassica crop, you peel back that layer and it smells just like kimchi underneath. And the science is still being done on this, but does seem to be some benefit to making kimchi out in the garden too. Important here is that to keep those microbes, keep them watered too. They're little animals. They need food and they need water. So here we keep drip tapes underneath the fabric, the silage tarp to keep about, they say 60% soil moisture is optimum for microbes. 60% soil moisture is an amount when you pick it up, give it a hard squeeze, and you'll see a drop of water come out. So fairly moist. So pull back the tarp or whatever you're using and simply rake. You can see the green beans that I showed you in the earlier image. Just look how easily they rake away here just after a couple of weeks of being smothered. And then even if you have some stubble that left over, you see the spinach left a little bit of stubble, that's fine. We can still transplant. In fact, I would not be amiss to direct seed between the stubble of the leftover crop. It's maybe not as neat and tidy looking as if you would till the garden, but just think about this, you don't have to spend money on a tiller.
Does that level of tilth, Ben, when you've got the stubble in there, does that gum up attempts to use the paper pot, or
Oh,
would you?
it can, depending on what it is. Kale can have really aggressive root systems, and you have to stay a good 3 or 4 inches away from kale stems. But here with spinach, I believe this was spinach here, you can see we're just a couple inches away, and the paper potter will go through just fine. And certainly, especially if you're hand transplanting, you can get away with all kinds of mischief.
You do paper pots for things like carrots too?
Oh, I've tried carrots and it just really doesn't work. The taproot of a carrot grows so quickly, it starts to twist. And I've found it's still best to direct seed carrots.
So in your kind of chunky compost, do the seeds germinate well?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to seed carrots, I'm going to choose this soil with the best tilth
Uh-huh.
possible. And whenever I'm direct seeding, I'm usually following a crop like kale. Let's see, you can see the kale on the right. Look at the right picture here. We've got landscape fabric underneath it. And that landscape fabric is suppressing weeds for the kale, but it's also flushing out weeds for the carrots that are going to follow the kale. Does that make sense?
Nice, yeah.
So that's where I like to direct seed is after tomatoes, peppers, those long season crops that I'm using a landscape fabric for. Those are usually pretty much weed free the next growing season. So why not direct seed into them?
Mhm.
Save the chunkier, poor, quote unquote, poorer soils for transplants.
Ben, there's two quick points in the chat that have come up. The paper pot system, if you can just say one or two sentences about that, what that is, how you go about doing it. And I can see on your slide here, no crop rotation, which is kind of controversial. I think that'll get the attention of some folks here who are used to rotating crops.
So first, the paper pot transplanter is a tool that the Nitin sugar beet manufacturing company invented for sugar beet production in Hokkaido, Japan. Most sugar beets in Asia are grown using that paper pot. Transplanter is used for that purpose for decades in Japan before some Japanese growers started using it for produce. And then it's only really been 10 years or less that growers in the US have taken notice of the tool and started using it. And it's basically a way of growing food, growing in chains. And these are paper chains. They're compressed from Japan, but they unravel as you transplant. And you can space crops at 2 inches, 4 inches, or 6 inches, or whatever spacing you need. You can buy chains of those different spacings. There's a simple non-electric tool that you pull along, and I'll see if I have a picture of it here a little later, that you pull along that unravels the chain.
It was just back one or two slides, Ben, when you were showing the stubble. I think that was is
Oh,
that thing
sure.
on the right? Yeah.
That's it. That's right. It translates to my little pulling buddy. And it's a buddy that they have models in Japan that fold in half so you can bike around the city with it from your apartment to your garden. and it's a buddy that helps you garden.
Hmm.
Fairly low cost system, pretty smart system. These chains hold 264 plants, and ravel to 144 feet per chain. So that's a lot of plants, and they cost between $3 and $5 a piece, depending on the spacing. And so it's a low cost way to get a lot of transplants in without bending over.
And may I just clarify, Ben, the beautiful compost you've been spreading there, that is the broken down leaves after some time, or
That's
is
leaf
that,
compost.
wow,
That's
it
correct.
really changes.
It sure does.
Hmm.
And so no crop rotating. This is not something we do intentionally. We don't intentionally rotate. We don't intentionally not rotate. We just put crops in where they make the most sense. For example, often carrots after a crop like tomatoes or kale based on the weed pressure that we might experience. So we don't, we have, however, grown some crops year after year after year in the same location, in part as an experiment. There is some new research showing that with this deep mulch method, the microbial life in this soil forms a long-term relationship with root systems of certain crop species, and they prefer to maintain those relationships over multiple growing seasons. And so it's not clear cut that crop rotating is a benefit. Now, I'm also not growing heavy feeding crops like corn, same place over and over again on a massive scale. That'd be a different type of a project. But we have not experienced poor growth due to a lack of crop rotating on our farm. That's simply been my experience. The same with cover crops. I'm not opposed certainly to cover crops, but with this system, we're going to tarp the lettuce that you see here. And the kale will actually get a loppers, and we'll have to cut those stems because they're so thick and woody, but we're going to leave the roots in the ground here. And so the previous crop is the cover crop, if that makes sense. It didn't make sense to introduce complexity to our system by adding cover crops.
There's a question, Ben, as to what kind of leaves are providing your leaf compost, what trees?
I think most of the trees in Goshen would be oaks and maples. And there are some pine needles in there too. Going to give you one greenhouse tip. It's the edges of the greenhouses that are the most problematic from what I've seen, where weeds want to creep in underneath. And especially where you have freezing temperatures in the winter like you would have, it's a big benefit to put 2 feet of insulation around the outside edge. They call that a Swedish skirt. They do this in Scandinavia, the greenhouses, and that skirt around the greenhouse keeps the ground thawed in the winter along the edge so that you can grow greens all winter in the entire tunnel. And of course, it prevents the weeds from creeping in too. Germinating crops. I'm going to throw random tips at you here and just keep throwing your questions my direction. Germinating crops, I recommend finding an old chest freezer, an old refrigerator, and put a crock pot in it and fill the crock pot with water. And on Amazon, you can buy one of these ink birds. It's an external thermostat. Essentially, you plug your crock pot into it, and there's a probe from the ink bird that goes into the germination chamber. And that probe tells your crock pot when to turn it on. And I found that it's within 1 or 2 degrees, 1 or 2 degrees of accuracy. And so we can achieve near 100% germination in here. If we set it for 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it will maintain 80 degrees or 79 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's 100, and it's very humid in here too. So we have what seeds want, which is the right temperature and lots of humidity. Deer fencing, just finished this project last week, so it's on the top of my mind. But critters are a problem in urban spaces, sometimes more so than in rural spaces. So this would be called a game fence. You can see there are smaller size openings at the bottom of the fence and larger size as they get to the top. So you keep out the rabbits and the the groundhogs, and you keep out the deer at the top. I'm a big fan of baseboards. If you can find the lumber, this gives us something to weed whack against, and it's a bit of an edging for the garden too. We've done this baseboard system for a number of years, and we just really like it. It keeps a nice tidy edge and saves a lot of, it's really the boundary spaces that take up time in farming, it seems. And so this eliminates that problem. Gonna skip ahead to the tomatoes here and share 7 tomato growing tips. Tip number 1 is take advantage of new genetics. Of all crops, it seems every season there are new genetics. They're constantly working on improving tomatoes. And the 2 that have worked well for us the last several seasons are the Margold and Mar Noir tomatoes. And horrible names here, but of determinate tomatoes, we have had really good success with the 589s and the 871s. There's a red and an orange. Determinate tomato that bred for flavor. They have soft skins. None of these tomatoes will ship very well, but their flavors are phenomenal in all of them. There's a picture. You can see these soft skins, but colors and flavors are just phenomenal and highly productive plants. So modern genetics is worth it in this case. We do grow heirlooms too for a number of crops, and especially in the home garden. For sales to restaurants, though, we've found that hybrids are much higher productivity. Our favorite cherry tomatoes are these 2, Clementine and Mountain Magic. They're larger size, so they're easier to harvest, but just as sweet and juicy and flavorful as the smaller cherry tomatoes. Tip number 2, starting tomatoes is always a challenge, but it's really not complicated. You need just really 3 things. 1 seed in a 32 cell plug flat. So these are the larger plug flats that's gonna space them out a bit more than your other crops. We don't pot up tomatoes, which is to say we don't start them in small cells, then pot them up to a bigger one, and then pot them up again to a bigger one. We just simply put 1 seed in here, and away we go. Then we'll use that germination chamber that I showed you, set it for 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, very critical, keep the nights above 55 Fahrenheit. If you can do those 3 things, you'll have very healthy, fast-growing tomato starts. These are 3-week-old plants here. They really grow quickly if you can maintain the right conditions. Third tip, tarp. The tomato season is simply too long to be weeding around your tomatoes all season, even on a micro-scale farm. We like to use 12-inch spacing for those indeterminates. We're going to train them up twine, and 18-inch spacing for determinates. Here's how we make these tarps, and then pinning them in. A little extra effort in the spring, but it buys you hours and hours of time this summer. You can afford to go to a Commodores game every so often. We reuse tarps. We've had tarps for more than 12 growing seasons. I'd like to use a hydrogen peroxide, a commercial grade 6% hydrogen peroxide solution, and spray down those tarps to disinfect them before reusing them every season. Fourth tip, prune to knee high. So as high as your knees are, prune your tomatoes, even your determinates, to have fresh air underneath your plants. You can see 2 types of tomato staking here. The determinate tomatoes have the wooden stakes on the left. The cherry tomatoes on the right, actually I use a determinate staking method, even though they're technically indeterminates, but these are just very tall stakes, 8 feet in height or more. And you can see that we'll grow them in a T shape, push the tops of the vines over once they reach the top, which actually won't take very long. They grow about 1 foot a week in a greenhouse. So there's an example of an L, I should say an L shape here. We've pushed the tops over and we'll harvest tomatoes overhead. Fifth tip is grow between your tomatoes. You need 5.5 to 6 feet is optimum row to row spacing width for your tomatoes. That leaves you lots of room to grow quick spring crops, especially if you've invested in a hoop house. Take advantage of that warm soil between your tomatoes. This bok choy, some bok choys are 21 days seed to harvest, so you have plenty of time to get a crop in and out before the tomatoes get big and bushy and would require that room. Here's kale as an in-between crop. And once the kale is finished or the bok choy, then we'll pull those row covers over or cover with another type of row cover, or not row cover, but tarp landscape fabric. And that becomes the path to harvest. With indeterminates, there's all kinds of trellising methods on the market. But the basic principle here is to grow them at a diagonal. In a hoop house, even an unheated hoop house, they will reach the ceiling faster than you think. And so if you have even just a twine that you yourself move and grow at a diagonal, these have rollers, and roller hooks are what they're called. Flipper is another system people like to use, QLIPR, which is what we're currently using on our farm, is the clipper system. But the idea is that the roots will be sometimes 20 feet away from the tip of the plant by the end of the growing season. So think of it as diagonal growing. Pruning 1 liter per twine. I like to prune 2 liters per plant, or choose 2 liters per plant, and grow those 2 liters up twine and prune off the suckers and any competitive leaders. So we could spend a whole weekend on tomatoes, but those are my best. Just want to show you my best tips. I like to harvest with these Haas buckets, kidney shaped, so they fit nicely around your waist. Okay, last tip is you've done all this work to grow your tomatoes, to prune them, to harvest them, then why not store them properly? And proper storage for tomatoes is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And we use that same germination chamber that I showed you, simply using the compressor from the freezer or fridge to cool the space. But if they are any warmer than that, then they start to ripen quickly, especially above 70 Fahrenheit, and you'll quickly have an unmarketable tomato. And any colder than 55 Fahrenheit, and you'll have mealy tomatoes. So 55 is about right. Okay, that concludes the slides that I put together for you folks. I threw a lot of stuff at you there in a short amount of time, but I appreciate your willingness to be here, entertain these ideas. I'm very passionate about not just the philosophy of microfarming and why to microfarm, but the nuts and bolts of it too. It's all, and the devil's in the details, as they say, but it's fun details, and I love to see these ideas in action. And it's such a doable thing. There's a lot to learn, but you can do it. And I've seen it over and over again, especially outside the U.S., but increasingly inside the U.S. Microscale farming is something people can wrap their minds around and get their hands in the soil and earn a profit from their efforts. So we have a few minutes if anyone has any further questions.
That's fantastic, Ben. You've got 2 books up here. The Lean Microfarm, I know local booksellers are stocking that. And you also have a middle volume, the Lean Farm Guide to Growing Vegetables, if I'm not mistaken. So you could get the whole Ben Hartman trilogy if you're interested. Let me see. In Goshen, is this idea, this lean microfarm that you are living into, is that catching on? Are other lean microfarms springing up saying, hey, I can do what he does? And as a corollary to that, if I may ask, Ben, I think there's people scratching their head saying, I really want the baby steps of what I can do to tiptoe into this as a lifestyle. If you can sketch that out. And if I may just throw in a third one, Laura Opie, are you there? You've raised your hand very politely. Do you want to jump in and ask a question? I think you're muted. Or you don't have, there you are. Now you're muted. I'll ask you to unmute. Throw it in the chat, Laura, if you can. I don't have the exact technical abilities here, but talk about this, the contagion of this idea and also the baby steps that I asked you about, if you would, Ben.
Sure. We have actually on our farm at what we call an incubator farm. And this is a space that we have set aside for other growers who want to try it. And these are young folks who might not have the suite of tools that's needed even for a first year garden. But what we do is give them a plot of land. It's a 2-year program, and they can farm there. They can ask me all the questions they want, and they can use all of our tools. And we have a wider water hydrant there for them to use. And it's a way for them to see if farming is right for them. Yeah, which it is for a lot of folks, but it's obviously not the right career choice for everyone. But it's a safe way to test out that career path. And so to answer your question, we're fortunate. Goshen does have a growing community of growers in the same way that sounds like Falmouth does too. And so there are pockets around the U.S. where like I said, we're losing more than 1,000 farms a month. But especially near urban centers, supportive urban communities, we're also growing a number of small farms. Baby steps to take if you're wanting to just get started. I write about this in the book. I call it 4-2 farming. Choose just 4 crops and 2 customers. Okay. This might be 1 restaurant and a farmer's market, or a restaurant and a co-op. And I recommend just 4 crops because it makes sense. It's easier to scale out from 4 than it is to scale out from 4 to 10 than it is to scale down from 60 to 4. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend tomatoes, and I just show you some tomato tips. I'd recommend greens, spring mix or mesclun mix, probably the most popular of the greens crops. If you're growing through the winter, cooler months, spinach should be on the list. Kale is a very easy to grow crop, and kale is one where you plant the seed once and can achieve up to 20 harvests in a season. So it can be highly productive per square foot too.
And Laura Opie, who you'll remember from a couple minutes ago, she asks, is this all organic? I assume so. And are you certified organic?
We had been certified organic, and we chose to drop the certification because of the time it took to do the paperwork and the cost. And our customers know us by now, and they were happy to buy our food and trust us that we use organic growing methods.
Mm. There's just one question. Farming Falmouth is looking at engaging with a property in the future to be sort of a platform for emerging farmers. And that's going to take shape over time. I know you've talked in the past about how your farm is a kind of a multi-use space. Is that the case right now with your micro farm, that you've got different things going on, like a flower farm and an incubator farm, or was that the old farm?
No, that's happening here. We would have a flower farmer who's doing an incubation type project. We have a produce farmer who's doing an incubator project here. And we have someone who's converting school buses into schoolies or RVs. So there's sort of a mix of cool projects, what we think of as cool projects going on here. A model we use is from the Intervale Food Hub in Vermont, but incubator spaces, we've just seen that be successful. And we did an incubation ourselves, Rachel and I did, and just a big fan of providing opportunities for young people from backgrounds and economic situations that might not be able to afford to jump right in to full-scale farming. It's a soft entry point.
And there we have hit the very top of the hour. Would you take one last question, Ben?
Oh, sure.
We'll just nudge a little bit into the hour. I do want to be respectful of your time. Ellie, can you unmute yourself there?
Well, just thinking about farming Falmouth. So with these incubator plots, are they a similar size to your own? Are they smaller because it's a new farmer? And then what's the funding source for that? Are there grants? Are your incubators paying rent? How does that work?
The current farmers, there's two young women who are using the incubator farm now. And the agreement that we drew up is they work 10 hours a year on our farm. So they need to put in 10 hours of service on our farm. And otherwise, it's a no cost. There's no money that changes hands.
Mhm.
And as far as outside funding sources, they do have, I can't remember the name of it right now, but where they sell to food banks, their food is bought by through a USDA program, and they take it to a food bank to sell. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the acronym.
Maybe two.
I see Jennifer Christian, our sort of the core farmer of Farming Falmouth, trying to pipe up here. I don't know. Do you have a question, Jenny? Are you there?
Do I get to say something?
Yes, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, everybody hears you.
Hello?
We hear you. Do you hear us?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Can,
We can hear
yes.
you.
There you are.
Okay.
Yes,
All
we
right,
can
great.
hear
Thank you. I don't really do like celebrity like excitement, but if I was gonna get excited about a celebrity, I'm like, you're my guy. I've had your book since it first came out, and I feel like probably half of my farming style is because of you and your Lean Farm book originally, and Elliot Coleman. And it's really exciting to be part of this and really grateful that you could join us because we're really trying to build a small farm movement here because it's all that's kind of left in town. And so I guess I'm just, again, really grateful and happy that you could come speak to us and happy to lift up your book as much as possible because it really helped me as a farmer not make as many missteps as I might have and to really put the energy where it mattered. So thanks.
Well, thank you. That's really encouraging to hear. And I can't wait to see the fruits of labor on my next trip to Falmouth.
That is a great note to end on. I wasn't blowing smoke at you, Ben, about that rock star stuff. That's how a lot of people see you. A lot of growers see you in that idiom.
Thank you.
I know that as a lean farmer, you want to spend time with your family, and we're going to let you do that. So thank you so much. You've inspired us, and I think we've learned quite a few things as well. Thank you so, so much for your time, Ben.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Have a good
Woohoo,
night.
virtual applause. I don't know if it works on Zoom, but there you go. They need to press a button or something. Thank you. And I'll go ahead, everybody, and end the meeting. You'll hear from us, Farming Falmouth, with a little follow-up email, I think, on this. We'll send you a message. And we're going to be rebroadcasting this in some form. So probably on FCTV, probably also on our YouTube channel. If anybody has any thoughts on that you'd like to share, you can send that to info@farmingfalmouth.org or directly to me, Kurt@farmingfalmouth.org. It was great to have you all. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Hope you have a great night.